Hello and welcome back to Interjections, post Scudetto Showdown. We're here to break it all down for you. I'm your host, Andrew. We have the full contingent today. Everyone's here. No more spin-offs. Jay, Mikko, and Irfan. Jay, how did you enjoy the debut of our mini-series?
Am I the only one who sensed like a deep political rift between Interjections and the new IJ Subito? Only me? For that particular week, it just so happened that, the pod was split between 2 and 2 for the regular episode and the spin-off series. So I don't know. I felt great racial tension, just a real big divide in general. But look, we're all back. That's what matters. And here to discuss the performance, if you can call it that, against Napoli.
I make well-informed decisions based off of data, and our views, Jay, are much higher than Mikko and his Irfan's. So, Mikko and Irfan, you're welcome for continuing to be allowed to be members of this podcast. Mikko, what's going on?
Thank you, Andrew, so that we can still be here. but yeah. What can I say? I thought we could also talk about a beautiful game in Bologna, but maybe we don't have time for that. So I guess we discuss about the performance yesterday. So I'm ready.
Yeah, talking about Milan's various failings are much more interesting than talking about Inter matches these days, to be honest. Irfan, what's going on?
Well, I'll say whenever a group becomes so widely successful, like the Beatles, there's some dissension in the ranks and people start to pursue side projects and maybe solo gigs. And I guess I have to tell you all that that's not going to happen here. So we're all still united, and the group, the band is still doing well, despite the side projects, the shorter versions of our shows, of our podcasts, and the spin-offs, as you call them. And then I just wanted to confirm to you all that I am wearing a suit, and I am thankful for you. I'm grateful, and I just want to express my gratitude towards the group openly and in my suit.
Well, you're now allowed to stay on this podcast. Thank you for expressing your gratitude. And don't worry, I've already told my wife she will not Yoko Ono us. The theme of today's episode for me is acceptance. It's just time to accept what this version of Inter is. We are a good team, but we're not a great team. We're never going to find that higher gear or next level. And I feel like each time we've talked post-derby, I've been sitting here lamenting the fact that we haven't upped our performance for the level of competition, the level of intensity required in these derbies. And that's why I'm accepting this is kind of who we are. We're a team that doesn't get full points against our rivals. We're a team that wears down over the course of matches and has heavy legs by the end of matches. We concede goals late, and we have over 40 matches of data at this point to prove it. This is who we are, and I'm accepting who we are, because up until yesterday, I believed we would be able to turn a corner. I thought we would win yesterday and put everyone else in the rearview mirror. We'd pick up points on Napoli and Atalanta, but that's not going to happen, and this team is going to be in a Scudetto chase until it inevitably stumbles over its own 2 feet or it somehow pulls out the victory. In hindsight, maybe I was too cavalier going to this match. It's hard to win in Naples, and like Jay said going to the match, and a lot of people were saying this. My boy Yoram on the forum was saying it. This match had major draw vibes, and we thought it would be two fighters like trying to feel each other out, trying to capitalize on slight advantages. So in a vacuum, getting a 1-1 result in Naples is perfectly fine. Like, that's an acceptable result. But that's where it ends. Because, like, what was that yesterday? We looked like a relegation side playing against the top of the table team. We spent 75 minutes of that match not playing football, just under siege. We were pinned back. And The most disappointing thing was like Napoli just had a level of intensity that we could not bring to the table. They were playing this like physically brutal style of football. They were fouling us every chance they had. The referee allowed it, and it bothered us. And you saw the impact of their physicality on the style of football we were playing because we couldn't string any passes together. We couldn't hold possession. In the first 20 minutes of the second half, Napoli had 70% possession. I was looking at some passing statistics on our team. Dumfries was 12 of 22 on passes. It was just a horrible performance in terms of stringing together anything. We didn't have a dangerous attacking sequence, let alone a shot on goal in the second half. It was just hoofing it deep for long balls and immediately squandering possession. And a lot of it was because Thuram was not fit. Clearly, he was not fit. And we've talked about the lack of pace in the squad, and you can't really play counterattacking football with a hobbled Thuram. Napoli didn't deserve that late equalizer. They just deserve to win the match outright. If you want to go the old XG route, they had 2. We had 0.3 with 0 XG in the second half. So, but you get the draw, and there are different types of performances like this too. There are matches where you squander possession, let the other team kick the ball around, but still feel structurally solid. But this was not that. This was just, it was poor. Like it felt like it was coming. Like I said, for 70, 75 minutes. And people are going to want to talk about the injuries. And I get it. We're undermanned at wingback. It's totally true. But do you really think the complexion of yesterday's match changes with a healthy left wingback in the squad? Like, does one man, Zalewski or Augusto, make a difference in the performance yesterday? Because yesterday you had a team that looked completely spent. Like I said, we didn't have the intensity or even the ability to play at the level Napoli were playing at. And it makes you think this team is toast physically. Like, they just look exhausted, and we do not have the talent or the depth necessary to compete on 3 fronts. And that's what we're trying to do right now with staying alive in the Copa and obviously still very much alive in the Champions League. But we just don't have the mentality, the ability, the squad depth to compete on all these fronts. We're too old, we're too spent, we're too injured, and it's not going to get better anytime soon when we play Feyenoord later this week. A shoe is going to drop sooner than later. Like we're going to bounce out of one of these competitions. We cannot sustain our current pace. Back to the Napoli match. I don't want to waste too much breath on the botched penalty call. I was stunned it wasn't given on the pitch, and then I'm further stunned when they didn't even go to VAR for it. The Paramount Plus commentator in America actually agreed with Doveri and said it was not a penalty. But whatever, man. Like, at the end of the day, DeMarco, world-class free kick to thankfully quell any impacts of the blown call. So I'm not too worried about that. Like I mentioned at the top, there was just a level of physicality that was allowed yesterday, and people are complaining about it. People are saying that Napoli were on the better end of those decisions. But yeah, I mean, Doveri didn't issue any yellow cards yesterday aside to bench players and managers. Like, he let the guys play. It was clear that was going to be the pace, that was going to be the type of game he allowed, and we just never adjusted to it. And look, I didn't love the refereeing in general yesterday, but it's not the reason we looked as poor as we did. Much like how having another left wing back in the squad would not have changed the outcome yesterday, a different referee doesn't change the outcome of that match yesterday. That's how poor we looked. The big glaring error in the match came down to tactics. It came down to Inzaghi. We've been doing this podcast for nearly 2 years. We've been talking about this decision for the entire 2 years. It has continued on in that time, and it still makes no sense. Taking off Bastoni to kick Acerbi to left center back. is a bad move. Even if a Cherby is not directly responsible or De Vrij is not directly responsible for the Billing goal, we always look shakier at the back. And now you have 6 or 7 instances this season of us subbing off Bastoni and us immediately conceding. This is a substitution that doesn't work, but for whatever reason, Inzaghi has his blinders on, and he's biased to thinking that this move gives us defensive solidarity. But once again, like, I can't even get mad about Inzaghi's substitutions yesterday, because does it matter when you're outplayed that poorly? Like I said at the top, we didn't deserve to get any points from this match. So getting 1 point, staying top of table, that alone is an accomplishment. But it was just a terrible performance, and it just makes you wonder how much longer this team is going to be able to compete, because, man, the wheels really feel like they're falling off. Jay, how do you feel about the match yesterday?
Interestingly, I thought it was our best defensive performance. The key difference from this game to other defensive or defense-oriented matches we've played is that it's the number of blocks. We got in so many blocks, so many tackles, so many sliding challenges that really stifled Napoli and just showed a degree of desperation and scrambling that we haven't normally shown, to be honest. We've been talking about this in previous episodes, that we have a tendency to shepherd teams well, but when push comes to shove and you need that 5%, 10% extra determination to make that sliding challenge and pull off that close block or whatever it might be, it's been lacking. And yesterday it wasn't. We were, dare I say, perfect in that regard. I felt we completely stifled a lot of their defensive or their attacking efforts by just being defensively committed, and it looked like it was going to pay dividends for us. That's the one good takeaway from the game. Maybe you can add Martinez as another takeaway. I thought, aside from 1 or 2 horrendous passes, he looked good again, made some good saves, unlucky on the goal. Looks like he belongs right now, at least based on the small sample size that we've seen from Joseph Martinez. Other than him and the defensive stability that I mentioned, or the defensive commitment rather, there's not much to take away that was positive. I'm concerned about the attitude that was on display. I don't know if this is a tactical thing. I don't know if this is a decision made by the coach to approach the game in such a way. I don't know if it's just the way things are playing out on the pitch. I don't know if it's the players melting under the pressure. I don't know if it's a combination of these things. But what I'm seeing is just this, what looks to me like a strategic decision not to attack or to invest very little in grabbing a goal. We saw this against Leverkusen as well. I think, like for like, this is probably the closest game, or rather I think those were the 2 games that resemble each other the most this season. There was such a unwillingness to attack, an extreme emphasis on defense, and whenever we did attack, it was, like I said, low investment, low effort, just long balls out, try and piece together some unlikely series of one-touch flicks, which, if it works, you get a man through on goal, or you get an overlap or whatever. But if it doesn't work, then you just lose the ball in transition, and that is the much likelier outcome. And that's what we saw against Leverkusen. That's what we saw against Napoli last night. Lautaro, Thuram, they were both horrendous for the most part. Lautaro deserved a little bit of credit for how hard he ran and how much he dropped deep to try and help out and try and act as like a point of reference for the attack from basically our own half, because that's how much difficulty we had in moving the ball forward and retaining possession further up the pitch. But by and large, especially in the first half and in the latter end of the second half, it was extremely poor. Any time the ball went to the forwards, their first touch would just send the ball flying 5 meters in the opposite direction. They couldn't control the ball, and Napoli's defense were swarming them, crowding them out, winning turnovers, and ultimately we were unable to build any forward momentum for the large part. And our midfield was uncharacteristically horrendous as well. I give Mkhitaryan a bit of credit because I felt he was defensively really he worked hard, very hard defensively yesterday. In fact, that's pretty much all he did. And thanks to Politano being an absolute retard, but Mkhitaryan cleared about 40 corners at the near post as well. So big thanks for that. He just had a lot of heading practice, and that's pretty much it. But still had to be done, and he did a good job of it. So there's that. But otherwise, as mentioned, Calhanoglu, Barella, where are these guys? And the two midfielders that came on, Zielinski and Fratesi, were both completely anonymous, completely useless. Overall, the Correa sub, I mean, you kind of get it, from Inzaghi's perspective. Correa is the faster player, so when you're playing on the counter-attack, it makes sense to have a guy who can dribble and is pacey. But on the other hand, maybe a player like Arnautovic is better at acting as a target man, and you can lump the ball to him and have him bring the ball down and lay it off to a teammate, So there's two options there, and Inzaghi chose what he chose, and we don't know whether Arnautovic would have worked out, but we do know that Correa did not work out. He has this really kind of infantile thing of when there's a high ball, rather than kind of backing into the defender and trying to win the header. Have you seen him? He kind of just like runs at the defender. He doesn't even look at the ball. He runs at the defender and kind of like jumps with his arms, kind of shielding his body, like a child trying to shoulder barge an adult or something. It's bizarre, man. It's truly strange. But that was another poor tactical decision from Inzaghi. But, Andrew mentioned it. The big one is taking Bastoni off for a De Vrij rather. It's a suicidal move that has cost us dearly this season. I'm sure, as Andrew alluded to, everyone's seen those posts doing the rounds on social media of the goals we keep conceding when the substitution happens, and you've got Bastoni coming off against Milan at the 82nd minute, and Gabbia scoring the winner at the 89th. Comes off against Udinese 75th minute. Luca scores in the 83rd. Torino, Juve, and now Napoli. It just keeps happening. As you mentioned, even if they are not directly responsible at times, there's a clear correlation there. There's a clear general destabilizing of the defense, which happens because Acerbi is clearly not comfortable at left centre back. In fact, it seems like he kind of forgets where he's playing at times. And the rest of the players, and De Vrij, often when brought in late, doesn't really do a good job of acclimatizing to the intensity of the game. Yeah, ultimately, just want to finish by going back and saying the strategy is a really worrying indicator of what's to come because, like I said, this is a mirror of the game we played against Leverkusen. And Leverkusen is, I think they're great, to be honest. I think they outplay us in pretty much every facet of the game, but they're no Barcelona, they're no Real Madrid. Maybe Bayer Leverkusen are a tier below the elite teams. Where the fuck does that place us then? At a tier beneath Leverkusen? Because if we can't even compete against this Napoli with the likes of Spinazzola and Billy Gilmore and Philip Billing, if we can't even hold the ball for like 2 minutes and piece together a semi-decent attack in 90 minutes against these guys, and against Leverkusen it was even worse, what are we going to do against like a Bayern Munich, against a Barcelona, if we ever get to that point, Feyenoord is on the horizon, as you mentioned. I like to think we'll do better than we did against Napoli, against Feyenoord. But if they put up the kind of resistance they did against Milan, the kind of spirited, opportunistic, gritty playing style that they did against Milan, then we're in for trouble as well. Because, as you mentioned, Andrew, this team has just proven time and time again, this team does not have that fifth gear to go into.
Yeah, if this team was just competing for Scudetto, if we were knocked out of the Champions League already, I'd probably still be trying to convince myself that we're going to find that next gear and we're going to get the job done. But we're just spreading ourselves too thin. And I'll say it again, this team looks tired to me. This team looks drained. Wednesday will be a big indictment on whether or not that's true, depending on if they bounce back. But Mikko, as you look at the match yesterday, what side are you on? Are you blaming the lack of players available at Inzaghi's disposal? Are you blaming the referee? Or are you blaming the actual performance the players put in? Like, what are you blaming for the draw?
I would maybe say that this is the result of us playing 11 more games than Napoli so far this season. The level, like you guys discussed, the level of intensity in this game and the tension right from the beginning, and the way like ref allowed the game to go, that he didn't like whistle all the contacts and so on, like might happen in Italy in some matches, maybe most, but in this match there were like a lot of physical contact, a lot of that kind of a game that you need to be ready physically for that kind of challenge, and clearly we were not ready for that, and also the kind of the tempo of the game was too much for us. That's how I see it. I think that no matter what players we would have there, I think it would have looked almost the same. Maybe the fact that DiMarco had to be taken off so early, maybe we would have been able to attack a bit better in the second half, at least for that part, when DiMarco would have been on a little longer. But then again, it's just a one guy. Maybe it doesn't make any difference there. I think we were not ready for this match, and I wouldn't blame Inzaghi for that we aren't ready. I wouldn't like blame any individuals. I would just say that we are like toast. We look done, like physically, mentally in that match. That there's just not enough energy anymore, and that's a slight concern for me. And I agree what you, Andrew, said, that we are still in 3 competitions and we absolutely cannot like finish them all successfully. And I'm not even talking about Champions League in a sense that we would go to the final, but I mean that even these Feyenoord matches, they will require extra energy from us, and that's out of the other 2 competitions. Even though the Copa is played in April, but still that's there. And if we beat Feyenoord, we'll have Champions League matches in April, so it's pretty stacked, or end of March and then April. So I feel that it's just too much. Like we are already here, and it seems to be too much. So that's a concern for me. And I agree with Jay to the comparison to Leverkusen game. In this match, it looked like we, especially after we scored the goal, it didn't look like we even want to attack, or especially in the second half. It was just like a battling to keep the clean sheet. We almost did that just like against Leverkusen, but not enough. And it was a bit unfortunate in a sense that we kind of played okay in terms of defending, especially the set pieces. They were defended very well, although like Jay mentioned about the Politano corner kicks, but other than those, and Raspadori were giving some of them poor as well. But we kind of didn't let Napoli enter our box too much to kind of okay, they entered the box, but they weren't able to like get the ball to Martinez or towards our goal. We blocked quite a many shots, and it was like a lot of sacrificing there in the defense. And then in the end, the goal, it was like well played by Napoli when Lobotka got the kind of his free lane to enter the box, and it was like over after that. I think there were mistakes made there. Like Inzaghi also pointed out that Lobotka should have never entered the box. Like it was too dangerous at that point. So I think we kind of did well, but then it was this one case when we did not, and it cost us. Yeah. So I wouldn't blame any specific instance, and more like the state the fact that we are just not capable of kind of play that kind of game when opponent is as aggressive as Napoli was yesterday. I think we've always struggled with this Inzaghi team when the opponent presses us high, but I'm not sure, can I say usually, but at least sometimes we are able to play through that when our guys just run enough and move enough and support their teammates enough. But yesterday that was not happening at all, and the attack was like it was non-existent because the midfield didn't help them, wing backs didn't help them enough. So there was just like there was no one who could help them, and our attackers are not players who can like just do something out of nothing by themselves usually. Maybe Thuram on his best day, but we know Thuram he's not fit at the moment. It's unfortunate he's not ready to play these games properly at this time of the year, because we would really need him to be on his top condition in these type of games.
Yeah, completely agree with everything you're saying, Mikko. And there's truth to the point you're making, which is that none of Napoli's attacks felt especially dangerous. The Raspadori move, where there are two instances actually where Raspadori like tripped over his own feet, and as a result, dangerous attacking sequences for Napoli evaporated. But aside from those, there weren't too many instances during the match where I felt like, okay, this is the goal. But still, just the overwhelming, the field being tilted one direction was too much to overcome. And you just had a feeling that eventually they were going to take one of these chances, and they did. And honestly, like I said, it's surprising they didn't take more of them. Irfan, how are you feeling after yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys all made like the right points and the best points. I think the only thing I'll add is, it did feel like we were playing down a man the whole match. Like it never felt like we were ever secure. And part of it, I think Napoli were extremely physical. Like it felt like back in the day playing one of those Juventus sides under Conte that were just run you over basically, and you just never stood a chance. And it kind of felt like that because they're so physical. Like there's so much fouling, and even outside of the fouling, there's so much just physical play that our guys clearly were not up for it. I don't think we're a particularly physical team, other than, I think Acerbi is pretty physical and Dumfries can be pretty physical, but we're just not a particularly physical team. And I think that that's been showing recently, but it's not a coincidence that it's been showing recently, because it coincides with us being just tired, like playing so many matches, tired and injured. And again, I'm not making an excuse. I think ultimately, if you want a team that's competing on three fronts, you need to have a team that's capable of competing on three fronts. And we clearly do not have the squad depth and the reinforcements to be able to compete. And I think what frustrates me so much is that, Napoli had to make substitutions to break through against us. We had their starting 11 pretty well in hand for most of the match. Like even Jay mentioned, we were defending really well. They bought these substitutes that had an impact for them. They were faster players. They were energetic. They were young. They were hungry. When we brought in our subs, it was an intense, immediate like downgrade and confusion. Like I don't blame Inzaghi. His hands were tied in a lot of ways. He had to sub out Hakan, who was very clearly hobbled. Like there were moments in that match where Hakan was just walking around and like noticeably limping. Okay, so like he had to take Hakan out, and he put in Zielinski. I actually thought Zielinski put in a decent shift as a Hakan replacement. I thought it was probably a net positive given how injured Hakan was, but it wasn't necessarily influential. And then Inzaghi brought in Fratesi, who, given how expensive of a player he is, again, was so disappointing on the pitch, did absolutely nothing. And our midfield loses a lot of its solidity when Fratesi's on the pitch. And then he brought in Correa as a replacement for Thuram, who was also noticeably kind of hobbled. And then Correa offered little to nothing. Like Jay's points about how he kind of just like doesn't really even contend for aerial balls and just kind of jumps and like twists in the air. It's so true. It was so frustrating to see that he wasn't even really attempting to do it. And again, like the thing is, it's not his game. So I do think that Inzaghi probably could have put in Arnautovic, and that would have been a better pick for this particular type of match, because Arnautovic is also pretty physical, and at least he can draw fouls. Like, dude, like during the second half, if someone could have just drawn some fouls to like give the team a little bit of a rest and to prevent Napoli's like consistent like wave of attacks, that could have helped. And I think that was another thing that was like lacking. But I look at this bench, I look at the substitutions that he made, and we could criticize him for taking off Bastoni, but I still stand by the fact that Bastoni does not finish matches. He does not play 90 minutes, and neither does DeMarco. And that's a known. That is a fact. And so why do we not have a reliable, left center back option? Like, yeah, Gusto should probably be it, right? But he's injured. So maybe that's one of the biggest kind of factors in all this. But I just look at our bench and there's nothing there. Like, we need a spark. We have nothing. You need somebody who's energetic or fast or somewhat tricky or pacey. Nothing. Someone who can like draw some fouls. Nothing. Someone who can break up the other team's attacks. Nothing. Like, there's just nothing there that you can rely on. And we're able to get by it most times because our starting 11 is still the best starting 11 in all of Italy. But when you're this deep into the season, when you're playing 2 matches, a week, and when your players start to get injured, those cracks start to become very apparent. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. The last thing I'll say is, ever since the Fiorentina match, and maybe before, we've been seeing some of these cracks happen, and a few good results against like Lazio or another team, I don't think necessarily can hide all the cracks. And I think one of the biggest things we're seeing, and I think all of you mentioned it in your own ways, is the midfield is just not stacking up right now. And I can't help but think part of it is because Hakan is very obviously injured. The ability for us to break down the high press or the physicality of another team, a lot of it starts from our ability to kind of one-touch pass in positions in the midfield that free up either the wings or a pushing center back or Thuram or one of the attackers. And a lot of that interplay happens in like that midfield, and it just hasn't been happening. And I think part of it is because Hakan is like very noticeably injured, and we don't have anyone who can fill that role when he's not there. Barella, I think, is always just an industrious player. Like, he's just, but he's part of that 3. He can't stand alone to influence and dictate the midfield. And then Mkhitaryan, Jay's right. He put in a great defensive performance, but we're not able to free him up to do what he needs to do, which is to interplay between the midfield to advance the ball at his feet and to connect the strikers with the midfield. And when he's not playing that role, you can't help but think that like there's got to be someone better that could be in the midfield if we're conceding that he's just not going to play that role the whole night. So the midfield to me is a massive issue right now, and I can't figure out what it is other than probably just Hakan being injured. And I'm so frustrated that we don't have the depth in attack and in midfield to help this team. And part of it, I think, is Oak Tree's fault for not investing in areas that we need. But part of it is just the players not performing. I mean, Fratesi, again, I don't want to dwell on it, but this was the kind of match that he should have been able to come into the match and make a difference. Like, we desperately needed something. He's young. He's not 35 years old like an Arnautovic, and he's not completely worthless like the way Correa is. And still, he was able to do nothing to influence the match. And so I'm extremely frustrated by the depth of the squad, not just in the fact that like we don't have bodies, because we do, but they're just so ineffective. Like, honestly, there's sometimes where I would take a lower tier, like energetic, fast, young player, even if they're a little sloppy on the ball, that's okay. but like sometimes you need that late in a match like this, and we just don't have it. So that's my concern. And Napoli, they did deserve more points. I'll take the draw for sure and run away with it. But we looked bad. We looked bad. We looked tired. And honestly, it felt for large portions of the match that we were down a man.
Yeah, and you've talked a lot about personnel, Irfan, and when you have as small of an operating budget as Morata and Auxilio do, you really need to be perfect. There's no margin for error. And unfortunately, what we keep seeing is that they have not been perfect, and rents do. I mean, the midfielders we had come on the pitch yesterday did not improve the situation. By that, I mean, Zelensky and Fertezi were both pretty poor. Jay talked about the striker substitution situation. I mean, we were choosing between, we're debating the merits of Arnautovic versus Correa, which it tells you all you need to know about the state of this team. That's the decision we're going back and forth on. We're choosing between nothing players, effectively. So when we talk about the lack of options for Inzaghi or the struggles Inzaghi had to cope with yesterday, a lot of it ultimately goes down to we have just such fine margins for error, and we've had a few misses lately, and now we're paying the price for those misses. So I want to do another pulse check. I've done this a few times now, but I have to ask, Jay, are we going to win the Scudetto?
Tough question. I know I said the same thing every time, but it really is tough. I think if you look at the team's ability to just kind of trudge forward and consistently pick up points against the smaller teams, then yeah, I think you have to back us. But I think there's still going to be some difficult games on the horizon. Bologna is one, I think. Atalanta, I think Roma and Lazio are still left. So the run-in is not necessarily full of easy teams either, having said that. So, you know what? I'm going to change my vote and say no.
Mikko, same question to you. As the optimist of the podcast, you have to say yes, or else all hope is gone.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes still, but yeah, it looks really tight at the moment. As Jay mentioned or listed those matches, we have the Bologna's away match, Atalanta's away match, so they won't be easy ones. Yeah, and like discussed about the schedule, it's only going to get worse from now. We've had like few at least weeks without midweek game, and now there won't be many as long as we are staying in the Champions League, and those matches are as important as the Serie A matches. So it's gonna be tough, but I'm gonna stay positive for now and say yes.
Irfan, you get to break the tie. Do we win the Scudetto?
Man, this is personally so difficult for me because of what I'm about to say. But I think our ability to win the Scudetto depends entirely on us completely throwing these two Milan matches in the Coppa. We gotta put this the Primavera side out there. I want like a full bench starting 11. I don't want a single starter on the pitch for the two Milan Coppa matches because we're not. It's kind of like you have to sacrifice something to win something else, and that's where my head's at now. I'm worried about this week's performance against Feyenoord. I think if we had a healthy squad, we would easily advance. But I think it's going to take a lot to get by this team, given how physically drained we are and how injured we are. And I think it's important to prioritize it because I think we need to get to the next round of the Champions League. So I'm not using Feyenoord as a way to sacrifice anything in the league. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with these Copa matches with Milan. And yes, they're a rival. Yes, they're our arch enemy in some ways. And yes, it's a derby and it's a trophy, a real trophy. But I don't know, man. Like it's what we were talking. Mikko and I were talking about on our spinoff. It's the Lazio match was like something, but you get to this point where now you're in a position where you might have to mentally absorb, losing to Milan in order to sacrifice and save, the other two fronts. And if we have to do that, then even me, who is a ardent Milan hater, will have to swallow that pride and do it. So I'm going to give you a caveated answer. But I actually think that we will win the Scudetto, but I think it comes down to us not taking these Milan games seriously. So if Inzaghi has that in him, if he has that reality in him to kind of sacrifice the Coppa, then I think we'll win the Scudetto. What do you think, Andrew?
I'm just really worried about the next 2 weeks or so while we wait for the Darmians, the Augustos, the Zalewskis to come back from injury. Yesterday, we haven't talked much about tactics, but Inzaghi did not know how to respond. During the match, he switched to a 4-4-2. He abandoned it during the match after he realized it wasn't working. Dumfries had to play 90 minutes at left wing back. I just could see this all falling apart in the next couple of weeks while we try and navigate this tough situation, because we absolutely refuse to play anyone from the Primavera, integrate them into the first team, which I think is what a reasonable coach would at least try to do in this situation. So right now, my answer is no. Right now, my answer is we don't have it in us because there's just too much going on, too many matches, too many injuries. Maybe if Feyenoord pops us and we get knocked out of the Champions League, I'll be willing to change my answer. But right now, there's just too much. There's too many distractions. I'm not feeling confident, especially after yesterday. And Jay mentioned it a couple episodes ago, and we need to now take it seriously. Juve, if they win today, are 6 points back in the Scudetto race. You already know Atalanta, even though they dropped points against Venezia yesterday, they're still lurking. So more and more teams are entering the fray, and Juve, one match a week, it's something to keep an eye on.
Luckily, Atalanta and Juve actually play against each other next weekend. So
nice.
That should help a bit with that. But yeah, we play Atalanta in 2 weeks. So that's a tough one.
I guess the question I have is, so now we drew Napoli twice. If we end up tied with Napoli, what's the next, tie break to win the league?
It's actually a Scudetto final match if there's tied in points.
Oh, really? Regardless of anything else. So if we end up tied with Napoli, we're gonna play one match to determine the winner.
Yeah. Yep.
What?
Yeah, it changed in maybe 2 years ago or last year.
It's very likely that there might be a tie this year.
Yeah, I'm also seeing that it could go to the final round, who's going to be the champion, or even could be a tie, as you said.
I have no faith in us winning the final match if it comes down to that being the decider for the Scudetto.
I can already see Lautaro stepping up to the spots and penalties to round out the shootout.
As much as I make fun of people who focus too much on mentality and this sort of thing, I do have zero faith that if it came down to a high-pressure one match to win it all, we would not win that.
All right. Any final thoughts from the Napoli game before we transition to the midweek Champions League?
I want to quickly comment on the result itself, or the outcome, that we got away with a point, and how somehow after these big matches, especially on 2025, we haven't been able to beat anyone, and yet we are in the Scudetto race, because Napoli's recent record has been so poor. So despite drawing with Milan, losing to Juve, and now drawing with Napoli, we are still at the top of the table, which is kind of funny that we are right there in the race. But at the same time, I gotta say that this Atalanta match in 2 weeks, it feels at this point that if we end up losing that might be we might not be able to catch Napoli or Atalanta. Atalanta is not that far anyway, but it's just funny at this point how we managed to like avoid the situation that we are trailing by several points. We are actually now leading by 1 point still. So kind of we're getting this kind of extra time all the time. Like every time we end up not winning the big match. But maybe this Atalanta match, if we can, I don't know, if we can beat Atalanta, maybe that's like that could be a big one for us. I don't see Napoli winning all the rest of the matches. Their results haven't been great recently. Although they played like really well against us yesterday, they almost played us out of the pitch. But still, I feel they will drop points, but we will drop points as well. It's just like to be able to maintain the points coming each weekend. So it's just a nice thing to notice that we are still there, despite these kind of performances and the results as well, since we've been quite inconsistent as well in recent weeks.
I would like to challenge Irfan. Do you own a suit? You're kind of accepting of the whole Inzaghi repeated sub of Bastoni, and you say like, oh, Bastoni just doesn't last 90 minutes. Is that actually the case, or are you in a position where you've come to believe that simply because of how often Inzaghi takes him out? Because I don't really feel like Bastoni's. There are players you look at and you go, oh, he's gassed, he needs to go. I don't really see that from Bastoni that much. He gets tired, sure, like anyone else, but I've not seen Bastoni in like such a state of exhaustion repeatedly, as such a state of exhaustion where I'm thinking he's someone who always needs a sub. You know, he's not like DiMarco, who's, I don't want to slander young Fede, but I'm pretty sure he enjoys cigarettes, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I don't think Bastoni's like that. So I don't know. I don't really buy it. I just think it is all in Inzaghi's head more than it is like a real thing that Bastoni has like known stamina issues.
I think we need. I don't know. I think we need to trust Inzaghi more than our like what we see. Like,
save that shit for IJ Subito, right?
I think we need to trust Inzaghi that he knows his players better than we do, right? Like I've seen Bastoni being like pretty tired like many times, and then he's been subbed off, and I see no problem with that. I don't know about yesterday. Inzaghi mentioned that.
Mikko, I'm a belligerent football fan. My eyes come first before any coaches who earn millions and millions of dollars. It's always the eye test, bro. It's always the eye test.
Of course.
Do your own research. Do your own research, Jay. But I will say, like, look, that stat that you're, the stat that's going around about how Bastoni was subbed off the pitch and the other team scores like within 10 minutes. That's also a function of like how late we are in the game, right? It's other players. You'd have to tie Bastoni being gone specifically to where the goal is being scored. For example, the Leverkusen game that we've talked about, Bastoni was on the pitch for 90 minutes. So he was there all the way till the end and we still conceded, So again, I think there's something to the fact that we're giving up goals late because we talked about this in a few episodes. We're old and we get tired. Like we don't have a young team and we don't have a team that's energetic to like sub on later. So some of it is just age. But look, I'm with you. I would love to see Bastoni finish the matches, but clearly Inzaghi consistently subs him out before 90 minutes. And that's been happening since like even last year. So there's got to be something to it, right? That he sees and that he wants to. Maybe he's deathly worried that Bastoni might get injured. Because a lot of times he pulls him when he doesn't have a yellow card. So it's not a yellow card thing. Maybe he's very worried that Bastoni could get injured. And if he gets injured, then good luck to everything for us because he's so critical. So I don't know. But there's got to be something to it. He never plays like the full 90. It's very rare for Inzaghi to leave him out there.
Yeah, someone asked him post-game whether it was a fatigue thing, and he said no, Bastoni was fine. It was tactical. But like at some point, you just need to... I'm kind of agreeing with Irfan here. You have to read between the lines and say, okay, he keeps taking off Bastoni in the 80th minute. So either he's seeing something he doesn't like, or the dude's just gassed. Like those are really the only two options because we have enough reference points to know this does not work.
Yeah, the last 6 Serie A matches, Bastoni has not played 90 minutes. Like he doesn't play them.
All right, so midweek, we're back in the Champions League. We've had a month or so off from the Champions League. Got to see Juve and Milan crash out of the competition. Atalanta crash out of the competition. But now it's our turn. Back to reality. We have a tough away trip to Rotterdam. Jay, you and I previewed this match a little bit in our last episode. Well, obviously, we haven't seen a ton of Feyenoord ourselves, but we did watch their performance, their valiance, their gutsy, their bold performance at the San Siro last time out. So has your thoughts on this match changed at all, given the injury situation, given everything going on at the club?
Not only has our injury situation worsened slightly, but yeah, you have to question whether this team can finally do it, can finally beat or win one of these big games and advance to the next round. And I have no clue what's been happening on Feyenoord's end since they beat Milan. Really, I don't know if I presume they will have recovered a lot of their injured players, and I don't know how many games they've played under Van Persie since he's taken over. But regardless, the bigger factor is their own ability, or rather inability, to overcome mental hurdles. I think if we can put out something at least close to our regular level of performance, then we're probably in for a good shot. But if we're dealing with injuries and hampered in the way that we want to play, then I think that away on the team. I spoke about this in previous episodes, that this team seems to have like a limit of how much effort it can give, and if that effort is not rewarded by a goal, then you see the head start to drop, you see the shoulders drop, and the team gets demotivated and runs out of effort if it's not replenished by a goal. So I can see that happening if we're not playing at an optimum level for us, especially considering our recent form has been pretty bad. I think we're in our last 6 we're completely even, 2 draws, 2 wins and 2 losses, which is not great considering we're aiming for a title, and that our nearest title competitor has been they haven't won in 5 games, right? 4 draws and a loss or something like that for Napoli, and yet we're still stumbling along and not taking advantage of this amazing chance that Napoli's given us. So every sign and every angle you look at it just points to one thing and one thing only, and that's mental weakness. And so when that is the biggest factor, when that is the biggest concern, then I think you have to be quite wary of Feyenoord. And yeah, to answer your question, or how difficult I consider this match to be, has definitely increased.
Yeah, so they've played 1 game under Van Persie, I believe, which was this past weekend, and there was a 0-0 draw against a team below them in the table. I don't have much of an understanding in terms of player recoveries from injuries and all that, but no immediate dead cat bounce from getting Van Persie in the fold. Played a 4-2-3-1. Mikko, I know you watched them come back at San Siro and dispose of Milan for us. So what do you think of Feyenoord, and how are you liking our chances at, once again, what is a very challenging away fixture?
Yeah, I watched them. I didn't concentrate like 90 minutes of that match, but what I watched, especially after Theo's red card, they didn't even look particularly good. I felt that Milan was still playing as if Feyenoord had had the red card shown to them. So I don't know. I don't really what to expect. What I expect is it's gonna be a tough match because it's in Rotterdam, and that's a tough place to play. But what I'm looking that they've had quite a few injuries as well as we do, and our situation got worse after this Napoli match, which is not great. But yeah, I would say like a kind of a conservative hope that let's get a draw out of this. It should be enough for us, and then we finish the matchup at home. Uh, I don't know. It's hard to kind of how to match us against this kind of a totally different team from a different league. Even though we saw those 2 matches against Milan, and Milan wasn't wasn't great. They were very poor in that away match, even though they like wasted some chances, but didn't play well. So I definitely expect a better game from us in this first fixture. But I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm going to be just get a result. Do not lose, and that should be enough. That should be enough for this. Don't accumulate any more injuries, and that's the that's the main thing, I guess, at this point. Get a decent result and then finish it at home.
Yeah, and it's worth reflecting on how Milan managed to go out to a side that I think we all agree is like inferior on paper to them and to us, which is that they conceded a really early goal in the away leg, a 3rd-minute goal, and obviously the match had barely even started at that point, but it was, Feyenoord were still willing to push forward. Ball took a deflection. They score a goal, and then they basically sat on that 1-0 lead for the better part of 2 full matches. So it's worth knowing, like, hey, if you can avoid a loss here, like, you're putting yourself in a really good situation to advance in the Champions League. But if we go down 1-0, 2-1, something like that to them, we're going to have one heck of a lift we have to pull at San Siro in a couple weeks. Irfan, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of just looking entirely at whether Hakan is healthy or not. And I think they're still waiting on figuring out if DeMarco's going to be okay to play midweek. So, with Thuram, Hakan, and DeMarco all either not playing or hobbled, it's definitely going to be an issue. So I'm kind of in the same boat where I think we just need to get a result. Don't go down. Like if it's 0-0, if it's 1-1, 2-2, whatever it is, as long as it's a draw, I think we're okay. But I'm definitely taking it seriously because if we had our starting 11, even with a midweek match starting 11, I would say we would easily win. And I'm not downplaying Feyenoord. I just think that we're a much superior team, so I think we could easily win. But given where we are now, I think you just aim for the draw in this one, and then you wait till you get to the San Siro, and then you win there.
All right, let's do some predictions. Jay, lead it off for us.
I say it's going to be a real shit match. I'll give it 0-0. Missed penalty by Lautaro.
On brands, but let's be real. The number of people who would need to not be on the pitch for Lautaro to take a penalty these days is pretty big.
Sounds about right. I'm gonna go with. I hope for a draw. Draw is fine for me, but I'm gonna go on brand as well, and I'm gonna go with 1-2 away win. Lautaro is not gonna miss a penalty. He's not gonna take one, but I'm gonna go with Barella scoring, and then Dumfries scoring goals, and then we concede a later goal to make it at least semi-interesting for the return leg.
No surprises there. Irfan?
I'm going to go with 0-1 Inter win. I'm going to go with a Asllani assist to De Vrij for the goal.
I don't think you've realized, Irfan, that Asllani has completely fallen out of favor with Inzaghi. He has been relegated to Coppa Italia duty. When we need to change out registas during important matches, we go ahead and put Zielinski in the position. So I guess what I'm telling you is Asllani's not touching the pitch in this match.
He's saving him for the Champions League. That was my understanding. That was my understanding of the situation.
That makes sense. Saving the champion among us for the Champions League.
Precisely.
I feel like one of those investors who just keeps chasing their losses with this Inter side, where we go and we put together a truly pathetic performance like we did against Juve or Napoli, and I'll predict us to drop points in the next match. Then we go out and we have a somewhat respectable bounce back performance and we get the full points. So in my normal emotional state of being, I normally predict us to drop points here after watching that garbage that I did yesterday. But we seem to respond somewhat well to these spots where we at least have some pride, pull together a decent performance. like I said, I haven't seen much of Feyenoord besides the 2 games they played against Milan, but I was thoroughly unimpressed with them when I've seen them this season. I like to think we're the better side. I like to think we can get out of here with a 1-0 win. So give me a 1-0 with a goal to let's give it to Arnautovic off the bench. Unironically, I just feel like he's growing into his spot a little bit. Thuram hasn't looked fantastic lately. Give me an Arnautovic goal off the bench. As our viewers at home are surely aware, due to their newfound fame and fortune, Jay's hot betting tip was sizzling last episode. Just completely crushed it. So now you need to follow in the footsteps, Jay, and deliver an equally strong bet this week.
Did you predict the 1-2?
That's right. I predicted Real Betis to defeat Real Madrid 2-1.
Wow, nice one.
Unfortunately,
Nice one.
I did not get the Anthony goal and assist correct, but his mere aura, I'm sure, contributed.
Was it that someone mentioned that he wasn't even playing in that match because he had suspension?
No, it was weird. He got a red card right at the end of the match last week, but it was like an absolute farce of a card, and then somehow the powers that be kind of rescinded it during the week, so he was available for selection.
So he did play it. Okay.
He did.
Okay.
Anyway, so my hot betting tip for the week is looking ahead to the Juventus-Atalanta game. Now, the optimists among you are hoping for a draw, hoping that, these teams take points off each other, but what's going to happen is Juventus are going to dispatch Atalanta 3-0, minimal fuss, and end up breathing right down our neck after we fumble points at Monza at home.
I don't know if I'm happy about this prediction or upset about this prediction.
Coop Minor hat trick.
Wow, I'll take it.
All right. Well, we'll be back midweek. We're gonna keep up our spin-off series momentum. Except this week we're cutting Mikko loose. Possibly. We'll see. Regardless, you'll get a Feyenoord recap midweek. We'll be back then. Until then, Mikko, take us away.
All right. This time I'm gonna say that thank you for all the listeners for the support and the likes.
We're grateful. Thank you for giving us your well-earned paychecks that we have used towards buying military-grade equipment. We appreciate it, and we just want you to know it's gone to good use. All right, seriously, Mikko, take us away.
For saying that.
Come on.